Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Sam Sorbo here for the Accidental Homeschooler, and we're going to talk today about loss versus opportunity, which is sort of more of a generalized thing, but it applies very firmly in the homeschooling circles. So I want to share that with you today. Thank you so much for joining me. And this is very exciting time for homeschoolers because we see so many people who are now sort of joining our ranks. Yeah, not necessarily by choice, but we're hoping that you see the value in what we see for home education, what we see as very valuable for both for our children, for our families, and for ourselves personally. I know that I've grown a tremendous amount um, during my time homeschooling, like leaps and bounds. I am a completely different person than I would have been had I allowed my children to continue to attend the institution, and they would be completely different people. So, loss of time versus opportunity, because right now we're dealing with a national crisis. Although, a quick update: we've got reports now that the drug cocktail that they are sort of talking about seem to be effective. And I'm overly optimistic. I think this will turn around fairly quickly. I think this will turn around faster than most people would say that it will. And part of that is informed by this idea that the media has a vested interest in stoking fear and panic, because it sells better. It just sells better. So, all right. That said, we're still dealing with this tremendous loss that we're experiencing. We're a loss of work, a loss of the at least what we perceive to be a loss of time. We're completely derailed from what we were doing. They just decided to suspend the Olympics for a year. I can't imagine what that means to all of the athletes out there who have been training just for this time. And now they have to go and rethink all of their training. And for the older athletes, that's another year. That's a big shift. So we have all of that. So I want to start with this idea of forced vacation. I've talked about this in a couple other videos. When I was modeling, I never took a day off because for a model, every job is your last job. Like you're just always thinking that you're just going to lose, you're just going to run out of work. And so I just never said no. I took every job that came my way. And it became sort of a yearly event that around Labor Day I would have an accident. But typically the accident wouldn't derail me. I would continue working even though I'd just been to the hospital or what have you. Until one year, I was on a job and the group of us decided to go horseback riding on the beach, and we were galloping on the beach and my horse threw me and I fell, and I did not realize it, but I broke my arm. And it took me about 5 days. I went back to work the next day. I worked for 3 days with a broken arm, not realizing it. It was very painful, but I was like, oh, what's a little pain? Just work through the pain. You got to get the job done. You got to keep working. And then 5 days later, I went to the hospital. And all of a sudden I had my arm in a sling. I had to take it very seriously because if I had tried to lift anything, the arm would have just broken. Like it would have just come apart. It's ridiculous. But my point is then I had 2 weeks where I really couldn't, well, maybe it was just a week where I really couldn't do anything. I really had to lay low. And then of course I had my arm in a sling, which really, prohibited me from doing much of anything. And it was my right arm. So that's my writing arm and stuff. Um, and, and I started to, at first I was very upset, because we don't like it when something out of our control changes our plans. But as I worked through it, I realized that it had given me sort of an opportunity to step back and take stock. And so that's what I'm encouraging today. Take a step back and take stock. And you've been given an opportunity to evaluate, not only your life, your family, your how you go about your day, your purpose. You are being forcefully um, made to consider, or at least you're being forced in the position where you have this opportunity to consider, um, are things really the way you want them to be? Or is this maybe an opportunity to make a shift? And so rather than allowing this to be a loss, let's take a step back. Let's change our perspective a little bit. Let's look at this as an opportunity. Schools are now considering having summer school. Is that something that you wish to engage in? Do you feel compelled to do whatever the schools tell you to do? Do you put that much faith in the efforts of the schools in general? Or rather than in general, like I speak in generalities because my kids aren't in those schools, right? I know anecdotally different schools handling this whole thing very differently. But for you personally, think about where your kids are in school, what the school is telling you to do, how reliable that information is, right? Because you have to look at the source. You can't just take any information that comes along. You have to look at the source and you have to evaluate the source. I'm suspicious of schools, frankly, not of individuals, but of the bureaucracy. I personally am suspicious. I remember when two teenagers beat a young teenager, their peer, beat her to death in a girl's bathroom. And within an hour, the superintendent of schools, if I recall, it was Maryland, came out and said, "Our schools are safe." And I was like, wow, don't know that I could trust anything she says from now on. I mean, that's outrageous to me. So take a moment to maybe sit down and make some pros and cons. Make a pro and con list. Make a plus and minus chart. We don't often get this opportunity to sit down and really contemplate where we are, what's our path forward, where do we want to go? What do you want for your children? Is all you want for your children college prep and career readiness? Is that what you want? Or do you want something else? Do you want something more maybe for your child? I know a lot of homeschoolers, this is not why I started homeschooling, but a lot of homeschoolers begin there. They're like, yeah, I don't think that the goals of the education bureaucracy in this nation align with my goals for my children. Now I can say that's true for me, but that's not why I started home education. So now let's move on to your kids. Let's talk about what kind of opportunity this might present for your kids. Kids might be going stir crazy because they're typically involved in, lots of sports and other extracurricular activity. And now that's basically been completely curtailed. There are no group sports for certain. You might be able to go for a jog by yourself or go for a walk with the family. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to sit down with your teenager and have breakfast or have lunch and make a lunch date. Say, you know what, I want to see you at lunch today. So let's say lunch is at 12:30 and, we'll make sandwiches and we'll sit out on the terrace or we'll sit in the living room, but we won't turn the TV on or, what have you. Make a date and then let's chat. What do you want for your future? Do you really want to go to college? If you want to go to college, what do you want to study? Because goodness knows, there is no reason to go to college if you just want to get a degree in basket weaving or whatever, right? If you are going to college, you better have a pretty certain reason, goal in mind for your studies, or I don't know why you're investing that money. You don't say, I'd like a vehicle for transportation, right? That's what a career is, right? It's a vehicle for transportation. It gets you to, the whatever success faster than if you just went and got whatever job, minimum wage, whatever was available, right? So that's a career. It's a vehicle for transportation. But you don't go to a dealership and say, here's 80 grand. I want a vehicle for transportation, and hope that you don't end up with a bicycle. That's ridiculous. But you see, we've been conditioned to think, no, you got to go to college. But you don't. One of the most successful people I know is a plumber, runs his own business, hugely successful, didn't graduate college. Another very successful person I know was in, I love this story, was in engineering school. And he looked around the class and he was like, wow, I'm pretty much middle of the heap here. Okay. And then a friend of his asked him to go and help him buy a car. And they went to the car dealership. And he looked at the guy who was selling them the car, and he's like, man, I could sell rings around this guy. And he quit engineering school because he saw an avenue for him that where he could be more successful than the average Joe. And he became he worked his way up, ran one dealership, took on another one, was running 3 dealerships in very short order, I might add. So, just because it's the prescribed way of doing things doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way of doing things for your individual child. So give that some thought. You get together, you can offer guidance. You can ask for guidance. Ask your teens for guidance. Empower them. Doesn't mean you have to take what they say. It doesn't mean you have to use it. Don't poo-poo it. That's not the point of the exercise. The exercise is to engage them and have an exchange, have a conversation. And it gives you the opportunity, if you're asking them for guidance, it gives you more of a standing to be able to offer them guidance on a more friendly level, I guess. I'm not sure. But it also gives you the opportunity now to, hey, let's cook dinner together. What do you want to make? Play a card game. Play card games with the whole family, right? Go for a walk, do some reading, maybe find that article that you've been meaning to read. Read it, then give it to your teen. Read this, I want to talk to you about it. What are your thoughts on this? And for by all means, talk about coronavirus. Talk about what's going on in the news today. Talk about the fact that the Congress couldn't reach a resolution. That there are some Congress people who are trying to put in a whole bunch of stuff into the bill. So, the bill that's supposed to be for assuaging the economic burden on the American people. Talk about that. There's the opportunity to do the reading that you otherwise couldn't get to. Classics, for instance. We watched a movie the other night that I hadn't seen. I don't know how I didn't see this movie. I thought I'd seen it. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And sad to say, oftentimes I'll sit in a movie and we'll get 3/4 of the way through and I'll go, oh, I have seen this movie. That didn't happen with Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So I think I've never seen it. It is phenomenal. And there are tons of those, right? Consider that the schools teach what they teach, but they don't teach everything else. So where this is an opportunity is the schools, you can teach the stuff that the schools don't necessarily teach. Think about that. Think about what you can impart to your children that they're not going to get from the schools, whether it's sewing. If you like to sew, I love to sew, frankly, or cooking or house cleaning, basic life skills, balancing a checkbook, looking at bank statements. Do your kids have bank accounts? Maybe now's the time to open bank accounts for your kids so that they have an understanding of how the banking system works a little bit, right? And then there's also opportunities for learning that are on YouTube. So today, rather than look at the loss of the school's work that your children were getting, if in fact you're one of those people that the school system, one of those many, many people that the system has just simply cut free, like we can't do this, we're totally unprepared for this, which is highly suspicious that they're not prepared. I find that odd. Every teacher, every teacher ought to have their syllabus, that they know what they're teaching, and they ought to be teaching from textbooks. If they're teaching from online materials, that should be available to you. Why is it not available to you? And how far can you trust an institution that tells you that they've got this handled, but they refuse to show you when the chips are down, when you're desperate for them to? They refuse to show you what they were intending to teach. That's outrageous. That makes me more suspicious, and I'm already thinking that this whole system is highly suspect, because I've done the research. In my book, They're Your Kids, I show the corruption that runs through our whole education system, and it's only worse today. In fact, I'm thinking that I need to update this book. I show what Common Core has been teaching, teach. I'm using that word kindly, right? How they've been basically uneducating or diseducating our children. I show some of the sexualization that's occurring in our classrooms. And it's just gone into hyper speed since I wrote the book. It's just been outrageous, frankly, what they're teaching our kids in school. And so now your kid, they've like sent the kid back to you. Gavin Newsom, who is fairly anti-home education, is actually advocating for home ed now. And they've sent you back your kid, and they're saying, you do it. We can't offer any help because we're so not prepared. How is it that they're not prepared with at least the next week's curriculum? How is that? Because I know of schools that have said, just take the time off until March 31st. In fact, I tell a story in my book about a small school that I after I started homeschooling, I felt so incompetent that I enrolled my boys in a small Christian school. And this is so absurd, right? I had my confirmation that I'd been doing a good job when the day that I dropped them off, and I still left them there for 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks, I went in to sort of double check that I was doing, it was a hybrid school. So I was homeschooling 2 days a week, I think, and then they were going to school 3 days a week, I think is how we worked it out. And they would send home worksheets and stuff on the internet. They would have links, and you would go and download the content and have your kids do it the next day, right? But a couple of times the content wouldn't download. And the answer from the teacher more than once was, don't worry about it. And I thought, now, wait a minute. If you're sending me stuff for my kid to do, but then you say, don't worry about it, really, what is it that we're doing here? Is it just busy work? If I can't download it and you say, no harm, no foul, just lose it, then maybe what I'm doing here isn't necessary at all. And in fact, that's part of the reason why I started homeschooling. It's also a story in my book. She sent home, the teacher sent home work for us to do when we were traveling. And it was not work that he normally had to do in the classroom. Anyway, you can read that in the book if you want. Go to samsorbo.com for more information on the book and all that. YouTube offers fantastic learning opportunities on a myriad of subjects. So I suggest you have a conversation with your children, and they can be any age, right? If your 5-year-old wants to learn about frogs, look up a documentary on frogs on YouTube, or look up, there's so much content out there on YouTube that, and you can put screening in place for kids, and you supervise. Okay, yes, you have to take a little bit more of a supervisory role here, but so do it. Step up to the plate. You're a parent. Don't sweat it. Just do it, as they say. And then this is the opportunity to investigate and pursue the individual interests of your children. So start that investigation today. Sit down with them, have a conversation, and by the way, it doesn't have to be the final decision today. It's like, well, what's interesting you today for right now? Well, today I'm not really interested in anything. Okay, then let's watch a video on history. You know who has fantastic stuff on history? Hillsdale does some fantastic stuff on history, but there's plenty. And for younger kids, you look up Pocahontas and you watch a little thing on Pocahontas or you read a little thing on Pocahontas. My goodness, you have the internet in front of you. You have every advantage over every generation that has come before because you have all this information in front of you and now you have the time to do it. This is not a loss. This is an opportunity. Okay, so please tune in tomorrow. We're going to talk about parental needs tomorrow. Parental needs as it goes with home education, because parents are often very sort of concerned about, well, how do I meet my needs while I'm educating my children, right? I have needs and exigencies myself, and how am I going to satisfy those if I'm so busy standing at a blackboard for 8 hours a day in front of my children? And of course, that paradigm, hopefully I've dissuaded you of that paradigm entirely, because that is not the way it works. And so if you can just stick your toe in the water and try it out for this week, just try this relational, multifaceted approach to education as opposed to the status quo. Try this and see if you don't get intrigued to try it a little bit more. I had a couple of emails I wanted to go through, just reaching out because apparently we met these people in Colonial Williamsburg a few years ago, and they have been disenfranchised. They provide historic character portrayals, tours of Williamsburg and Yorktown, Virginia, and dramatic historical presentations. But of course, with the economic troubles, they've lost their income. To compensate, they're posting live Facebook videos. They're not charging for access to the videos because there are folks who are in even worse situations financially than they are, but they would gladly share the programs. And so all you have to do is you can go to Facebook, and if you can afford to make a donation, they're just sort of crowdfunding as they go. You can do that. And of course, the name of the business is called Shades of Our Past. So once again, I don't have sponsors here. This is a public service announcement, if you will, Shades of Our Past. And I'm taking his word for it that we met his wife. She played Jan Vobe, the keeper of the King's Arm Tavern. I will say we visited Colonial Williamsburg, and it was such a memorable trip. I highly recommend it. It was just fantastic because at a place like that, you really kind of get immersed in the history and you start to really feel like, okay, now I can see how things happen. And they do reenactments, which is fantastic. So if you get a chance to go to the Facebook page for Shades of Our Past and take a look at the reenactments, I honestly haven't had a chance to do that. We did it in person, so it's not high on my list of things to do. But if you've got younger kids especially, but even older kids, have a look, Shades of Our Past. And then this person reached out and said, saw you on Fox News about homeschooling. Right on, girl. I find it interesting that we are in a predicament where parents actually have to parent. I have a niece who homeschools, and I'm so grateful and thankful for her. So thank you to that person for sending in that email. And let's see. Please subscribe to the videos so that you'll get tomorrow's show. We will be doing another one live at 9 a.m. I'm going to do live at 9 a.m. all week this week. See how it goes. It looks like we're growing a bit of a following, which is good. And hopefully maybe one of these days I'll be able to figure out how to work the videos so that I can answer questions as we go. So far, I'm not being very successful at that, but this is all new for me as well. Go to my official Facebook page, the official Sam Sorbo Facebook page. Please like it. I am working on a more sort of multifaceted link for you guys to go to just poke around to answer whatever specific questions you have. But by all means, email me. If you go to samsorbo.com, you can email me direct from there. All the emails come straight to me so I can take a look at them all, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Homeschooling is one of the greatest gifts of living in the United States of America. And I think that it's so important that we continue in this vein because homeschooling empowers people. Our education system limits them. Why you feel inadequate is because our education system has taught you that you're inadequate. And so I beg you, reconsider before you send your child into a system that is geared to teach them just how inadequate they are, because they're not inadequate. They're amazing. They're amazing children of God who can do amazing things with their lives if they are just encouraged and set free to learn. And now that's enough emotionality. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please tell your friends to tune in here. And if you got the email, the blast that I sent out over the weekend, I only want to do one a week. I don't want to inundate people. But if you got it and you would share it with your friends, and they can sign up for the email blasts, and I'll do another one next Sunday. I really want to grow this movement. I think that it's high time. I think, quite frankly, the title of today was Loss versus Opportunity. I think this is an enormous opportunity for parents, for children, for homeschooling, and for the nation. So, and God bless the USA. Thanks for tuning in.